Well, good afternoon. Bob Spitz here, Drive Facebook Live. Along with me is my co-host, Tony Whistler.
Hello.
Hello. And our special guest today is Mark Probst of Probst Auto Body in Detroit, Illinois. Hello, Mark.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Excellent. Would you introduce yourself for those who are tuning in? Who you are, where your shop is? I said Dietrich, but nobody knows where Dietrich is, and
Sure.
and kind of shop you have and all that.
Okay, Mark Probst, born and raised in Illinois. I opened my shop in 2000 or let me get 2003, January 2003. I was 26 years old when I opened my shop. Recently, I said shops because a few years back I opened a second location in Flora, Illinois. And just a reference, if you're not from Illinois, you think of Chicago. We are nowhere near Chicago. We're way south, kind of mid-southern, about right smack in the middle. If you look on a map, we're right between St. Louis and Indianapolis. So just a very rural community, lots of what we call towns, lots of smaller towns in our area.
It's a big farming community.
Big farming community. Yep, yep. Like our large town that we go to that kind of hosts most of the stuff is a town of about 15,000. It has like most of the industry. It draws people from about 5 counties but yeah, it's just like I said, otherwise than that, it's just like a lot of little small towns here and there.
Yeah, typical small town USA. You know, where I live in the big city. I live 36,000 in McMinnville, Oregon, but everything around me is 5,000, 1,000, just so
Yeah,
everybody comes to
yeah.
McMinnville from everywhere to go
Yep.
shopping. So yeah, I understand that. But the town of Dietrich itself, how big is it?
So the sign coming into town still says 650 people. I think we've doubled it. It hadn't been updated for a while, but I think we're at least at 1,000 people. So we've
Oh,
grown.
wow.
It's a huge. So yet no, the sign coming into Diedrich says population 650 people.
Like a boom
Yes.
town.
Yeah, my goodness gracious, it's getting crowded there. Holy cow.
Right.
Coming from Southern California 5 years ago up here, leaving Southern California, anything smaller than 30,000 people was unheard of,
hmm
Yeah.
so yeah, so those are wild
We
numbers.
have we joke about it. We got one stoplight in town, so it's that kind of town. We have one stoplight.
Yeah, you and I don't know if you remember Deanna Cole, now Deanna
Yep.
Uri,
hmm
from Van Cleve, Mississippi. I
Yeah.
remember when her town got their first stoplight.
The big
I was
upgrade.
consulting her at the time. That was a big deal.
For sure. For sure. Totally.
Yeah, but now let me ask you this, Mark, because it's fascinating to a lot of people. How do you go from a one-man band in 2003 in a town of 650, now potentially 1,000, to expanding that with that small of a population to two locations with what, over 10 employees now?
I think we're at 14 full time
14
between the
full-time
two.
employees. So
Very nice.
let's talk about that. How do you market your way and grow in such a small town?
So a lot of factors, and it wasn't overnight, obviously. Like no, in 2003 I opened. It took me a year and a half, and I hired my first employee after a year and a half of trying to go solo, which is very difficult. I mean, I know you guys got some clients that are like that, many clients that started like that. So then it was me and one other guy for almost 4 years. I went with just two of us. Um, then made another crazy, when you talk about risk, I took a huge risk, bought some property and built a new building, and it really put me financially strapped. And I hired my me and two other employees. So I hired an additional one. So it was the three of us. And not much change. I mean, we grew a little bit. We got along a highway, but it didn't grow like I thought it would. I mean, we had more visibility. And then, I mean, I'm going to put my plug in. Life didn't start changing until 6 years later, and that is, no secret. I'm on here with you today. But when I signed up with Management Success at the time, which is now Drive, when I started getting consulting and using the technology of the consulting, that's when I started making all the changes and tweaks, and that's when I seen my company start taking off. If that makes
nice.
it. And I can go into more details about that, but that's how it started. And then from there, I utilized what I learned to grow.
Right, because I believe one of the things that your original consultant had to get you to do is hang up your painting mask and your gun.
Yeah, I was still 6 years into it. I was still working in the shop every day, painting. I love painting. And then if a customer would come, I would, I call it the quick bath, the air gun, blow gun, wash your hands, run into the office to write the estimate. As soon as I was done with the estimate, I would go back into the shop and start working. And that was just a normal everyday is how I operated. Yeah.
Right.
And when did that change exactly?
Even when I got a consultant, you know how a lot of shop owners are pretty stubborn.
No.
I something about them. I don't know. I'm paying you to tell me what you do, but I'm not going to listen to you, kind of deal.
Right.
It took me probably another year before I officially hung it up for good. And I laugh about it because I used to tell the story like I had to start wearing my quote unquote like nicer clothes to work so I wouldn't go out in the shop and work, and then I officially did it. I mean, like I said, probably about a year where I finally quit going into the shop, and then I just focused solely on the office. And I started seeing big changes even with just that first move.
Sure, because for an owner, there's no money painting cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. The money's in the office.
Yes, you're right. 100% right.
Yeah. I know. And that's a good tip. And for anybody who's still trying to run their business, working in the back and the front, which can't be done successfully. I don't care how good you are.
Yeah.
If you just start wearing Dockers and a nice shirt to work,
you'll
stay out of the workflow if you do that, at least a little.
It was very, very true. And so the immediate change when I did it, what I realized, because I didn't think I could stay busy, which I'm laughing at that now, but you started spending more time, like I said, spending more time on the estimate, more time with the customer. You could do, started implementing follow-ups, none of this of which of what I've done before. And then just that alone, the more you show more care factor because you wasn't worried about getting back out in the shop. And I said, so there's a lot of pieces to growing, but that was a big piece is when I, walked out of that, finally quit working in the shop, and then things started changing from there.
Well, I love that you said, sorry, I love that you said that you thought you wouldn't have anything to do. And I've seen that with a lot of guys who work inside the workflow. They think if I'm not doing this, I'm not going to have anything to do because they have no idea what they're not doing or what they should be doing.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah. Now I know another one of your drivers was you had a growing family at the time, didn't you?
Yes. I'm trying to think of what the phrase is. It said when you don't have an option. I just had my third child, was about 3 months old, 4 months old, and it was like and I go back to the passion. Passion's a huge part, but more than I say this, I talk to high school students and other businesses and I said passion's a big piece of it. However, the education is even bigger piece of it to get the right help, to get the right mentorship, to lead you where you want to go. Because I didn't have a choice. I was going to work as hard as I could to make it work out, but I did find out there was easier ways. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Oh well, that's very common. If I just work a little bit harder and I just work a little bit longer, I'm sure I can make this place make money. And then spouses become widows because they never see you. and your
Yeah.
children go, "Who are you?"
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for me, when I committed to the training, the consulting, I mean, I've always been that way. I mean, once I'm in, I'm all in. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I was scared, I was nervous, but once I made that commitment, like I felt like I had nothing to lose. And also, you know, I made the commitment, so why not get the most out of my investment? So, you know, I was all in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so
obviously,
whatever.
you're one of our earliest recipients of elite management, elite shop manager, uh, and that's a heck of a tip of the hat to you. You know,
Yeah,
master elite of shop management is a very hard, challenging level to achieve, and you don't get
sure.
there unless you're all in. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, the training, because you mentioned education and just how important management training is, because a lot of folks who run shops don't even realize that there is management training or that they even need management training.
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, I mean, just to see the foundational stuff. And I said, I still remember when, you know, how I was so clueless. And my very first employee, when he was, you know, how you want to say it? He used chewing tobacco. And, you know, I remember the first time I watched him spit on the floor in the shop, and I was like, dude, that's not cool. Like, and it was like policy, you know, and I didn't really think of it at the time, but like, you know, I'm like, you can't do that, which is kind of like my first policy, you know, and but the management training, I've been around. I mean, since I first started with you guys, I've been very involved in the industry. I've traveled across the country. I've been in, you know, hundreds of shops probably. And I mean, I see shops doing even 3, 4, 5 million in sales that still don't have the foundation in, which is a little bit scary. And also, I've also seen shops doing huge sales that don't have make no profit either. So I said it's very, very interesting, because it's amazes me some shops can get to those amount of sales but still not have the foundation pieces in.
Right.
So yeah, when you say management training, I'm 100% into it. Like I said, you got to have the foundation, you got to have the management, you know, and a lot of it refers back to policies, procedures, you know, SOP, you know, standard operating procedures, just stuff like that. And the other thing that I realize is the more people that you have, the more policies you need. And even to this day, stuff still happens. And I'm like, I've wrote probably 300 just policies in general about this and that. And to this day, I still have stuff happening, and I go looking for I'm like, wow, what's my policy on this? And I'll start looking. I'm like, wow, I don't have one. I don't have a policy on this, because it's never been an issue before. But you know, with in my case, 14 employees, you get all kinds of stuff thrown at you, and you never know what the next thing is going to be. So it's keep growing that structure, as far as the business and the management side goes.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The more people you have, the more structure you need, the more policy you need, the more training you need. And that leads me to my next point about training, because, you know, collision, you and I have talked about this, Mark. You hit all the new technology before GR does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And keeping on top of that training is so vital.
Yeah. Across the board. I mean, whether it's, I mean, in everything for myself, as far as management side, for technician side. I mean, because like I said, we're getting the vehicles that are, you know, less than a year old at 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles. I mean, you went to the aluminum, you know, phase, the different materials, the different steels, high strength steel, ultra high strength steels, all that, through all that mess. You know, then the EVs, you know, which they're a whole nother animal that we're still learning. But all of that, like I said, there's one thing we are very, very beneficial in our industry is there's a lot of companies that train depending on what you need for your shop. You know, and I still think, and I don't think, I know getting the foundation first is probably the most important piece of that. to get it, and then you lock in everything else from there, or you build off of that foundation. And I said that goes back to policies, procedures, the basics. You need to know your basic financials and understand them. Basic marketing when you talk about growing your shop. I mean, I had no clue. I graduated high school. I went to 2 years to a community college for auto body, but I never had any other business education, period, when I opened my shop.
And how do you feel about the training now? Like, as far as training your staff, do you have a really good plan in place for that? Like specific checklists and stuff?
We're constantly building that. We're always looking. I got behind me, you can kind of see my goal board. And every year, like with new staff, and it's a conversation that happens often, is I look at what, first off, what training we can do in house. We try to do it. We implement some of that stuff. Second off is, what staff do I have and what's needed, and kind of what I kind of pencil it out for the year, like our goal is, because I said if we have a new technician or new customer service, so I look at what training that I could send them to, or via Zoom or however it be, and then also again, everything, once you understand the finances, you also got to understand that you might have a budget on this too. So, you'd like to say you could do it all within 6 months and be done, but that's not the case, because it's an ever evolving cycle to me. So yeah, we have a list of like third party companies that we, like, okay, who needs what, where are we at on this cycle? And we're improving ours. I'd like to dial it in even better, to have a more of a set system. And maybe that's possible, but maybe it's not possible. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, collision is very different really than general repair, because depending on the size of your collision shop depends on how you organize that shop. From like speaking with Jody Gatchell, he went that whole route of thinking of himself as really remanufacturing rather than repairing.
Yeah.
Right. And going key to key and trying to get away from supplements, and
yeah.
And then the cars get so complicated, there is no such thing as a curbside estimate anymore. I mean, what are you estimating?
No. Yeah, you're right. And it can keep, you can't, the one thing that I've found out, and I use this example every year with my staff, is just because it works today doesn't mean the same system is going to work tomorrow, because the things change, the systems change, the cars change, the insurance companies change. So I said, and you always kind of look at that too, like, is this model that we're using now today, is this the same model we need to be using? Because I use an example locally, not mention any names. There's a couple, I know I say this respectfully, there's a couple shops that's been around a very, very long time in our market. And I mean, honestly, it doesn't look like they changed since 1980. They still look the same. And but at one time when I was a kid, like, those are the two premier shops, so and I always ask myself, it's like, well, what happened? Why didn't they never made any improve? You still walk in and they got the Snap-on calendars with the girls on them, like,
oh wow.
And I'm just, but that model worked in 1980,
Sure, it becomes a museum.
It does.
Do tours.
Yeah, because if we're going to, the ongoing challenge of finding and recruiting people who want to work in our industry, understanding the sensibilities of the next generation, and what do they really need and want, and what does the culture in the shop have to be to really nurture these people? Because one thing is recruiting them, another one is developing them.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. We see that as well too. I said it's a different. I love when people say I can't find employees, or and I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, because the unemployment rate is very, very low. Nobody wants to get into this industry, and I disagree with that, because I said we have I think it was 42% of our staff is in their 20s. So I disagree with that when they say
absolutely.
That's great.
Can't get the young technicians. Now, however, I will say this is what they want, what I wanted when I was that age, and what I think my employees want isn't the same. That has changed.
Right.
Flexibility. I mean, and I ain't saying, I'm using general statements here because it's not everybody, but they don't want to work overtime. Overtime ain't even like really even a concept. Like, no, I want to work and go home. I want to do my thing. I want the flexibility. I want to, so it said that, and they want it quicker than my generation did. My generation was, you put in the hard work, it'll pay off. It'll eventually pay off. And I'm seeing that changing as well. So like I said, with your shops, like I said, we're constantly having conversations like, are we doing the right thing, or are we taking care of our employees, are we satisfied? I just had a 22-year-old that worked for me for 2 years just leave. I mean, I'll be straight up with it. I didn't want him to leave. I was shocked. My jaw hit the floor when he told me he was leaving. And I questioned myself. I was like, okay, what could have I done different? I mean, could I have done something different? My keeping up with the pace of the general business society.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I wouldn't beat
think
yourself
you
up.
constantly ask yourself those questions.
Right, but
yeah, don't hit yourself too hard.
Yeah, the upcoming generation doesn't think in terms of staying in the same company for 30 years. That's not in their thinking.
No, you're right. I've seen that.
Yeah.
So,
and that leads us back to something I know you've embraced and we've taught forever, and that is you can never stop recruiting. Because just when you think you've got it all dialed in, someone says, I'm leaving.
That's right.
I know. And I've fell in that trap many years where you get a pretty solid staff and I'm really like, we really don't need to recruit. I mean, I got this staff ain't leaving me, and you just never know what happens when, and the next thing you know, you're scrambling for more employees. The one thing that I'll touch on that I found to be, I say this when I go talk to other shops too, is the recruiting. Yes, absolutely. And another piece that I feel shops have the opportunity, then don't take the advantage of it, is going to your schools and planting those seeds early.
Mm-hmm.
Every year I'm at the schools. We have the kindergartners come into our do a shop field trip every year. There's another group of fourth graders we go and visit every year. I usually go and talk to high school students 2 or 3 times a year, and not necessarily recruiting, but yet I'm planting the seeds. And we get to talk about your shop, and the differences of the industry, the technology, and the kids. Where my 50-year-olds don't like the technology, the 20-year-old loves the technology.
Right.
And you might find some kid who actually legitimately is interested in doing it, and then now you've set him on a path, and maybe one day he'll work for you.
Yeah, and you get in front of their faces, and it's not so scary to like I said, the kids today my 3 kids are watching podcasts and TikToks, and they get to know people off of videos. So I said a little different, but and I know that's a whole marketing strategy as well, but this is me getting in front of the students, and I feel like shop owners have that opportunity, and you can plant those seeds early and often, so I always tell people, take it if you ever get asked that, honestly, I can't take credit for this because I think a consultant had told me that, like, never turn an opportunity down to go speak to a group of people.
Absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah, we've always suggested to take advantage of job fairs and career days and just show what this industry is really all about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's part of our success of having such a young staff, because I said we have done fairly well to draw them in, and then what we see is the bigger challenge is what are we going to have to do to keep them? And like I said, I don't know that I have the interest for that, and it's a constant conversation we're having.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping the country is moving back towards encouraging young people to enter the trades.
Absolutely.
Because there's been so much dissatisfaction and disappointment with kids coming out with a 4-year degree and they can't get a job.
Yeah.
And they have a huge debt.
Yeah. Locally, we've been very successful. I've been very happy with our local market. I'm on a board with a group of business owners and all the local superintendents. I think there's 5 or 6 superintendents of the high schools, and they created a career academy, and it's designed for skilled trades.
That's wonderful.
And I mean, I don't know that goes on everywhere, but here locally, they've been very proactive to encourage back to the trades, which I'm thankful for.
Oh, absolutely. Otherwise, who's going to fix it?
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Everybody can't be an anthropologist.
Yes.
Somebody has to fix the plumbing in the cars.
You know,
Right.
we're actually running short on time, but I wanted to ask you, besides training, how important was it for you to have a coach, to have a consultant?
It, it was very, I mean, every professional athlete has a coach, right? Like that's no secret. You don't watch a football game or a basketball game without a coach, but you know, every one of us, every body shop, every business is a professional. We're a different professional. Nobody's watching us on TV, but you know, and you think about having a coach, well, somebody to look into you and without emotions, you know, showing you where you can improve at. And we're like, hey, if you tweak this and tweak this, it's so hard to see when you're in the game. You know,
Right.
when you're playing in the game day to day, you can, sometimes it's so hard to see through that forest, and you can't see. It might be something simple, but you can't see it because you're so busy, and you just, I got to get this done, and I got to do this, and you can't see the improvements you need to make. Coaches are there to bring the awareness there. I've had a number of coaches. I mean, since I first started with you guys in 2006, I mean, even with your own company, I've probably had, you know, probably at least a half a dozen of your coaches that I've did over my consulting with Drive. And all of them have been very, very helpful. And I've had consultants, you know, in this industry more specific for production, for other, you know, blueprinting and for other things like that. And it's like I said, you're going to raise your game, you need a coach of some sort. At
Couldn't
the
have said
very
it
minimum.
better.
Totally agree.
Yeah, and there's a big piece to that too, I think, that I didn't know. Besides the coach, you know, I mean, mentors are great as well. Somebody that's maybe been there before you, and also being part of a group, you know, some sort of 20 group, because they all have their value in different ways.
Right.
Sure, absolutely. Hey, Tony, I think we're ready for a station break, aren't
For a
we?
station break. Yeah, I think we are. We're going to talk about who we're going to have on the show next week. Next week, we're going to have Kimberly and Leonardo Perez of Mechanic Project Auto Repair of Lakewood, Colorado. So that's who we're going to have. I'm not sure what our subject will be, but I'm sure it'll be interesting.
Well, we also have something else on our station break.
Oh, that's correct. What am I forgetting? Oh, that's right. We have an expo coming up in June in Dallas as part of the Rec Week. So that is going to be a new and fun approach to expos. If you haven't signed up for the expo, do so now. Now would be a perfect time to make a call on that, because right now I bet the airline tickets are going to be cheaper than ever. Now I'm gonna ask Mark if he's coming to the expo. Are you coming to the expo, Mark?
You put me on the spot. Let me get on my calendar.
Okay. We'd love
Very
to have
good.
you, Mark. It'd be great to,
Oh,
you know,
sure. And Dallas Fort Worth is a beautiful place too. So
yeah, it's just a hop, skip, and jump down from where you are.
yeah,
Now,
something like
that
that.
is a big hop.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
great. All right. Well, Mark, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I wish you nothing but continued success. We didn't touch on your racing. We didn't touch on all your kids' activities and how getting your shop into the condition you're in, you are able to spend time with your family, which is so vitally important to really that life balance.
Okay, well, we got
Yeah.
1 minute, so tell us a little bit about your racing, please.
No, it's a hobby. I started when I was 18, and I went hardcore at it for a while, about 5, 6 years. I mean, just bracket drag racing. Um, and honestly now, and I put it to the sideline. I keep getting pulled back into it, but it's with kids and everything else and business. And I said, I actually have, my wife says too many hobbies, because I have about a half a dozen hobbies. So I can shift gears, but I do have a 68 Camaro drag car that I love. Runs high nines and a quarter of a mile, so it's fun. I don't do it as often as I used to, but I have a lot of stuff that I keep me very busy.
And you've sucked your son now into the game.
Yeah, he's got sucked into it. Something about we keep getting sucked back to cars somehow, way or another. So
Yeah, one way
I
or
guess you say
another.
it's in our blood or lifestyle.
There you go.
Well, once again, I appreciate your time, Mark, and wish you nothing but success. And I want to thank everybody for tuning into this week's Drive Facebook Live. I wish everybody a very nice weekend, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
See you guys.